All right, good morning. It's 8 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. This week should actually be pretty easy to get through. It's really not that complicated, but we'll spend as much time on it as we need. Uh, so really the material for this week is about arrays. So what is an array? An array is a collection of multiple values, but it's all associated with just one variable. So what do I mean by that? So generally, throughout the course so far, if you needed to say have three numbers in your program for whatever reason, let's say temperature. We'll have a little bit of a theme today about temperature with the examples that we do. So let's say you wanted to have the user type in temperature for the week. So there's 7 days in a week, and you want the user to type in the temperature for each day. So let's see what that looks like without arrays, and then let's see what it looks like with arrays. Okay. So we would need a variable. We're just going to use whole numbers for the temperature, but we'll say temp day 1, temp day 2, all the way through 7 of them. Don't know how many that is. That's day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and day 7. There, we have a variable that will help us get the temperature for each day of the week. Okay, so let's ask the user to input a temperature for each of the day. So we need to print something out. We're going to print out, enter the temperature for day 1. Oops. That's not spelled right. Nope. There we go. Now it's spelled right. Enter the temperature for day 1. And then we will have them type in the temperature for day 1. Temperature of day 1 is, we need a scanner first, right? Scanner equals new scanner, system.in. There we go. And temperature of day 1 is equal to the scanner.nextInt. There we go. So now we want to ask them for all 7 days of the week. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, let's go here and change the variable name and the day. Day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. It's a little bit bigger. And of course, the variable names have to change. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. Okay. So, if we run this, it'll do what we expect it to do. It says enter the temperature for day 1. I'm just going to put 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 50 degrees, 60 degrees, and 70 degrees. And there, that's the end of the program. Because that's all I really did, was just have the user type in a temperature for each day of the week. Okay. Well, let's suppose we want to get the average temperature. Well, we could do the total will be, day 1 plus day 2 plus day 3 plus day 4 plus day 5. And we're getting somewhere with this. Day 6 and day 7. And then the average would equal the total divided by how many we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure it's a float because I want to get a floating point number for the average. Remember from earlier in the course, if we put this right here, the total is an integer, and 7 is an integer. So that would be integer division. And so we would lose any kind of decimal fraction in the math. Just a little callback to earlier in the course. So I'm going to make it a floating point number so I actually get a floating division out of it. And then we will print system.out.println. The average for the week was, whatever the average is. All right, let's run it. There we go. Let's go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And the temperature, the average for the week was 40.0. Of course, if we run it again with different numbers, really can put in whatever we want. I know that's probably high for some temperatures, but whatever. And there you go. The average temperature for the week, was that. So that works, for 7 days. Okay, what if we wanted to do it for a month? That's 30 days or 31 or sometimes 28 or occasionally 29. So should I repeat this all this right here, each one of these 30 times out if we were doing a month? What if we were doing a year? Would I repeat this 365 times? No, that's a little ridiculous. And also with these separate variables, I have temperature 1, temperature 2, temperature 3, and so on and so forth. Well, if I was doing this for a month, do I have to have 30 different named variables? And the answer is no. We can use an array. And so now we'll see how we can do this as an array. And here's how you make an array. First, you have the type it's going to be. Remember, the array is a bunch of variables, but it's held in the name of one, and you'll see what I mean. But one of the key things is that they all have to be the same type. So if I have an array of values, I have to say what type it is. I'm going to make this one an int, an integer. That means every value in there has to be an integer. If I make it a float, every value has to be float. If I make it double, every value has to be double. If I make it a string, every value has to be string. For my example, we're going to use an int to represent our temperatures. Then we name the variable, whatever we want to name it. I'm just going to call it temperatures. Do one step back. After integer, you put the 2 brackets. Give me 1 second. Okay. So when you have the type and these 2 brackets, you are telling Java that this is going to be an array. Now you need to name your array. Just a variable name. It can be anything you want. I'm just going to name mine temperatures. Notice I don't call it temperature because now this variable represents an array of temperatures. It represents multiple temperatures, not just one value. It can have multiple values. So let's name it appropriately. We can name it temperatures. We can name it temperature array. That would be okay. That's very descriptive of what it represents. So let's leave it as temperature array. But then you have to do an extra step here that you don't have to do with your standard variables. If we were just making it an int, we could just leave it right there, right? Or we could set it to be 0 if we want it to be 0 at the beginning. But you don't even have to do that. But when you have an array, you have to tell Java how big the array is going to be. And you do it like this. You do equals new int, the brackets, and inside the brackets, you have to put a number. you have to tell Java how many items that you want to have in your array. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you have to use every single spot, but you do have to give it some kind of size. Meaning, if I'm going to do the days of the week and there's 7 days of the week, I would put a 7 in here. This array will let me hold 7 integers, 7 integer values. If I was going to do a month, I would do 31. Yes, some months only have 30 days, and February only has 28 days. But if I'm kind of treating all these the same, with this array, I could store the temperatures for any month, because 31 is the most days that a month would have. If I would put 28 here, sure, that would work for February. But whenever I get to a month that does not, well, excuse me, that has more than 28 days, if I try to use this, it's probably going to crash my program. And that's because whenever you tell Java how big you want it to be, you can use exactly that much of it. You can use less than that if you want, but you can never ever go above that. If you go above this number that you put here, it is incredibly likely that you're going to crash your program. So that's how we make an array. Again, this is the type: integer, float, double, string. The brackets represent that it is an array. It has multiple values associated with it. This is the name of it. It follows the same naming convention for all the naming that we've done so far. Just make sure you name it something descriptive of what it's used for. And then we have to have equals. We have this word new. It just means I'm creating a new array. And you again tell it what type it is and how many values that it can hold. All right, now let's see how we can use this. We're going to do a longer example, and then I'll show you how to shorten that up even more. So here, when we're asking for the temperatures of the week, temperature for day 1. So instead of having a day 1 variable, I will use my temperature array. And then inside the brackets, I have to put which slot in that array I want to use. Think of an array as a bunch of boxes lined up beside of each other. For our example here, actually, let's put this back down to 7 because I'm only doing a week. When I have 7 here, you can imagine that I have 7 boxes lined up beside of each other. Inside of each of those boxes, I can put one thing, one value. For this array, I can put an integer because I said this array is an integer array. So imagine this is just a bunch of 7 boxes side by side. And this is how you put something in the box. You have the name of the array, you have you have those brackets again, and inside of here, you put which box that you're going to put it in. And it may seem a little counterintuitive, but the boxes start counting at 0. They don't start counting at 1. So if you envision in your head all the boxes lined up side by side, the very first box is actually box number 0. That's not just a Java thing. That's almost all programming languages use that methodology, where when you're dealing with arrays, counting starts at 0. So this is going to let us get the temperature for day 1 and put it in the array in the first box. I say the first box, but the index here is 0 because we start counting at 0. And that's what this is. It's called the index of the array. This is saying I have my boxes and I'm talking about the one at position 0 at the very beginning. So if I'm doing day 2, we use index 1. Since we start counting at 0, 1 is actually that second box. And so on and so forth. I'll come back and fix the indexes in a second after I copy and paste. So index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you'll notice, and the important thing to remember is that the counting of the index starts at 0, but I don't go to number 7. And why is that? Why don't I have a temperature array at 7? Why don't I do that? That's because that's too many boxes. Since I start counting at 0, box number 6 is the 7th box. Box number 7 is the 8th box. And if we look back up at our array, I said there's only 7 boxes in that array. I can't use number 8. It'll cause my program to crash. Just remember the index is you can kind of think of it as one off about which box we're talking about. So if we're talking about the 3rd box, the 3rd thing in the array, the 3rd value, it'll actually be index 2. And if you try to use something outside of that, it will crash. If you try to use a negative number in here, it'll crash. Or if you try to use a number that is bigger than what your array can hold, your program will crash. All right. So why is this good for us? It doesn't look like it made it really any shorter, did it? I still have it. We'll fix this. I still have all these statements out here, right? One for each day of the week. If I leave it this way, still, if I have, a month that I want to record, I'm going to have 30 of these statements, and that's just unrealistic. So we're going to use this in conjunction with a loop to make it significantly shorter. So you've already done loops before. And if I ask you if you want to get the user to type in so many things, let's say you want them to type in 7 temperatures. How can we make a loop that will do something 7 times? We can use a for loop, just like this. That's a for loop. Let's make some comments in here. This is a scanner to read input. An array of 7 ints to hold the temperature input. We're going to do a loop 7 times. If you need more review about the loops, let me know. I'm not going to dwell on them. We covered that in past weeks. And now I can kind of delete all this other input. And here's why. Each time in this loop, I already said it's going to loop 7 times. Right here, this tells you it's going to loop 7 times. I have an array that takes 7 integers. right? I want to ask the user to type in the temperature each day of the week. So let's tell them .println, enter the temperature for day, day I. Before we do any input, let's look at that and see if that's what we want. We run it. And it's almost what we want. We say enter the temperature for day 0, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you're going to say day 0 is today and you want to know today. But for me, whenever I'm counting up days, I'm just going to use the natural language and say day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. So we can take this I and add 1 to it. And that should give us what we want. There we go. So now I have a prompt asking them to enter the temperature for each of the days. Now we just need to get it from them, right? And how can we do it? Temperature array, something here is equal to, the scanner.nextInt, whatever they type in, right? The question is, what goes here? What goes there? We already talked about you would put a 0 here if you wanted the input to go into that first box, right? You could put a 1 here if you wanted it to go into the 1 box. You could put 4 here if you wanted it to go into the 4 box. But what could we put here so it will go in consecutive boxes? So we need some way to put, all right, the first time put it in box 0, the next time put it in box 1, the next time put it in box 2, so on and so forth. Well, we already have something that's doing that, and it's the I. So in here for the index, you can put a variable. That variable, it has to be an integer though, but this works perfectly fine. So what's going to happen here? All right, well, the first time in the loop, I will be 0. I will print out, enter the temperature for day 0 plus 1 is 1. Then temperature array at index 0 equals whatever they type in. It's the end of the loop, so I'll go back up to the loop. I now add 1 onto the I. I is now equal to 1, and I do it again. I'm going to print, enter the temperature for day 1 plus 1. So enter the temperature for day 2. I'm going to take temperature array at index I, and now I is 1. It's the next box. Last time it was box 0. This time it's box 1. And this will keep repeating as long as this loop repeats. And this will get us all 7 days inside this one temperature array variable. And so to do the average again, just like we did, we're going to do a couple things with this example, and then that'll be about the end of it. Like I said, arrays are fairly simple, very powerful, but fairly simple. So let's do something to get the average again. We still need to remember the total temp. So each time in the array, we get the temperature, and we will add that temperature to the total temp. Right? Temperature array, I'm sorry. So each time in the loop, we print out what day it is. They're going to type in an integer, which will get stored in the temperature array at index I. And then we're saying that same temperature that I just saved, I'm going to add it to my total temp. And then at the end, we can still get the average. Total temp divided by how many do we have? We have 7, but instead of putting a 7 there, we can do something better. We can put the name of our array dot length. And we need to make one of these floats so it's not integer division. And then we'll print out the average, of course. Average is average. There we go. So this is shortened down a fair amount. Let's run it and make sure it works. All right, starting to enter the temperatures. It's just 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. There we go. The average is 7, and you can do up the math on the calculator and verify it. So this made things shorter to get that days of the week. And what's great about this is if I want to expand it to months, well, all I have to do is change this to a 31 and then do my loop 31 times. In the real world, since of course not all months have 31 days, you would still make it as big as 31, but the number of times you loop, you would probably do less. All right. So let's talk about another useful thing we can do for with these loops and temperatures. Really just one more thing to cover. And then we'll see if you have any questions. Let's say we want to find out what is the highest temperature for the week. All right. Let's not worry about the average anymore. Get rid of the average. Let's say, oops, I can't get rid of my array. Got to keep my array. Let's say that we want to find out what is the highest temperature for the month. All right, so let's add our comments a little bit. So scanner, it's our temperature array. There we go. Going to loop 7 times and input the temperature. Put the temperature. Now, figure out the hottest day. So if we have an array of temperatures, how do we find out which one has the highest value? Obviously, it's not just important for temperature. It can be anything you're talking about as far as value goes. Not necessarily monetarily, just any kind of value you can place on an item. You can compare them. So let's figure out what the highest temperature is. Well, first, we need to go back through the loop again to look at all the temperatures and compare them to each other. 31. Let's knock it back down to 7 so I don't have to type so many numbers. Now, to access the temperature, just like we did here when we were saving a temperature in the array, to figure out what the temperature is, I can do it like that. And so I need to remember what is the hottest one. So let's keep a variable that says hottest. And just set it to something really cold. That's probably fine. So now I need to ask myself, is this temperature less than the hottest one? If it is less than the hottest, then we just update our hottest to be this temperature. Just think about how that works. So our hottest variable starts off really, really cold. Now we're going to loop through all 7 days. we're going to say, is the temperature on this day less than the hottest one that I know about so far? If it is, then the new hottest is equal to whatever the temperature was for that specific day. Let's run this. Hottest. Now we run it. Let's just make up some temperatures. 1, 2, 2, 1, 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 3, 3. Whatever. Oh, the hottest is that. I have a mistake, right? Oh, I have my sign backwards. I want to know if today's temperature is greater than the hottest one that I know about. That's why you test your program. That's why you do test tables. Let's put in some fake temperatures again. There you go. The hottest was 54. And let's look at it, see if it was. We got 12, 21, 42. Yep. 54 was the hottest temperature. Of course, you can do almost the exact opposite if you want to figure out what the coldest temperature is. I'm not going to do that directly for you. You can figure that out. But that is all of the material for this week, really. Like I said, the arrays are short and simple, but very powerful. And looking at your assignment, what I've already done here in front of you today is really about all you have to do for your assignment. Obviously, you need to tailor it to whatever the assignment says. But for the most part, it's the same assignment. Okay, what questions do you have?
I'm good, Professor.
Good morning.
Yeah, I said I'm good. I realized that we're just two of us on the call, so
Okay.
yeah.
All right, then I'll go ahead and wrap it up then, and I'll get the video posted up a little bit later today.
All right, thank you.
All right, have a good weekend.
You too.